Okay. Let me start recording this and we're ready to go. Okay.
All right. Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our board meeting for June 22nd, our regular meeting of the Board of Education. I will call the meeting to order and request a roll call.
Mr. Newmoff?
Here.
Mr. Bush?
Here.
Vice President Darrow?
Here.
President McClelland?
Here.
And Ms. Kalinowski is not joining us tonight.
So our first item tonight is approval of board minutes. Members have had the opportunity to review our minutes from our May 13th and May 18th meetings. If there aren't any changes that are needed, I would request an approval for those minutes.
So moved.
Mr. Darrow? I missed the second. I see Mr. Bush, so I'll give it to Mr. Bush.
Well, Mr. Bush was the first.
Mr. Bush
Oh, he was the first?
Yep.
I'm sorry. Mr. Bush moved. Who seconded?
Me.
Mr. Newmoff.
Okay, Mr. Newmoff.
Newmoff. I don't know. You pick.
Mr. Newmoff,
There you go.
roll call, please.
Mr. Bush?
Yes.
Vice President Darrow?
Yes.
Mr. Newmoff?
Yes.
President McClelland?
Yes. Now to tonight's agenda. Let's see if we can make this a little more clean. Any additions or corrections to the agenda, Mr. Sawyers?
No, thank you.
Okay, so with none, could we have a motion for approval of tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Mr. Darrow, a second.
Second.
Mr. Newmoff, thank you. Roll call, please.
Vice President Darrow?
Yes.
Mr. Newmoff?
Yes.
Mr. Bush?
Yes.
President McClelland?
Yes. So we have an opportunity now to go to an opportunity for a public hearing on the school calendar. Mr. Sawyers.
Thank you, President McClelland. Board of Education members, in accordance with Ohio Revised Code, we are required to host a public hearing after providing 30 days notice to our public of an intent to modify the school calendar for the 2020-21 school year. We've effectuated all such notices and invited public commentary through email prior to tonight's Board of Education meeting to specifically request any input related to a change in the school calendar. Essentially, the change, as I've noted previously in Board of Education meetings, is to eliminate for the 2020-21 school year the 4 2-hour delays that are currently in the school calendar and effectuate a full day professional development day tied to winter recess on January 4th, 2021. Ms. Jenkins, did we receive any public commentary through email?
Did not.
Seeing none, I have nothing else to add unless the Board of Education has questions related to the change in the school calendar for 2020-21.
Any discussion?
None for me.
Okay. With none, then we will move on to communications to the board and superintendent's items, Mr. Sawyers.
Thank you very much. I want to start this evening with really just an update for the Board of Education and our public related to culture climate and the work that we've done since our last Board of Education meeting. So I think it goes without basically being said that as a school district, we're committed to creating a culture of accountability that achieves the best academic and developmental outcomes for each student in our school district. It is our purpose and it grounds the work that we do daily within our school district, both academically, but also social, emotionally, and culturally to best meet the needs of our kids. We remain committed to listening, learning, and understanding all the perspectives being shared related to culture climate from our related to our school campus specifically. I mean, there's lots of conversation going on throughout the greater community related to culture climate and what's happening within our community, within our society, or within our world as a whole. But specifically, we're going to focus on the school campus because that's what we're responsible to do as a learning organization that we govern and ultimately administer on a daily basis. We expect that some conversations, as I said previously, may be hard to have, but we remain committed to doing so on a daily basis. We continue to safeguard our students and are committed to continuous improvement so all of our students can thrive in a safe environment. Since our last Board of Education meeting, when I introduced the topic and we had some dialogue about it, I've met with board leadership to discuss parent and student electronic communications that we've received to date regarding culture climate on our school campus, and the specific responses that would be sent to acknowledge initially the receipt of those communications, and our intent to continue to do the research necessary to actually determine what the next steps are for specific responses in any particular that they've identified. I've continued to engage with the City of New Albany and the New Albany Community Foundation representatives on shared opportunities that could happen, specifically between our school district and the city or the community at large, related to culture climate, and ultimately having discourse associated to what those opportunities could be, not just within our school campus and our responsibility, but how we can partner with the city or the foundation and the work that they might be imagining doing to support our community at large on this specific topic. I asked the SOAR African American Parent Network to partner to actively engage our parents, our alumni, and our school personnel in meaningful ways. I asked them if they would specifically sit down and think about what that potentially could mean from their perspective to help us as a school district to further improve our culture and climate. And based upon that engagement, we've had 2 opportunities to go back and forth in conversations, either through electronic means, through email, or through phone conversations. The African American Parent Network has met twice, is my understanding. And later this week, the administration and board leadership will have an opportunity to participate in a virtual meeting with them to listen and understand firsthand from their perspective what we potentially could do to further engage in a meaningful way to support culture and climate on our school campus. Members of the leadership team continued to meet as we plan for the 2020-21 school year. One of the topics that we have actively discussed is how we actively engage student voice into the conversation. We did receive some emails specifically from current or former students with some information related to culture climate on our school campus, and want to actually determine how do we create meaningful voice to that for students as we engage them in this process, because it's important, because they're clearly firsthand stakeholders and customers on our school campus on a daily basis that contributes to their success, both academically and socially emotionally. I did share, and one of the initial questions I received from the African American Parent Network, Parents for SOAR, was specifically related to some data. And so Mrs. Lofton, as the assistant superintendent, and other members of our administrative team are actively working to collect data to answer some specific questions that we have received, specifically related to professional development sessions and requirements for staff related to culture climate activities, our hiring data and staff protocols, specifically in our hiring processes associated to staff diversification, curriculum audits, and the conversations that we're having with Mr. Emery as the Director of Elementary Ed and Dr. Hamilton as the Director of Secondary Ed, and what specifically that looks like from a curriculum perspective to answer specific questions that have been received by the school district. And then also student programming, again, related to the social emotional aspect of what's going on within the culture on our school campus based upon the questions that we received. In addition to that, the administrators are discussing how to better incorporate culture climate via the student well-being initiatives and programs that we offer on our school campus. So as the board is aware, there's plus or minus 20 age-appropriate, developmentally, social-emotional programs that exist across our school campus that students get access to based upon their chronological age. So one of the things that Mr. Hood and I have talked about is specifically, what can we do to have that conversation with our school counselors, with our mental health specialists, and those programs that are currently being utilized to further understand how we can enhance them or better utilize them to enhance our school culture, if at all. So after the parent meeting later this week, board leadership, based on my conversations with President McClellan and Vice President Darrow, we will meet to define the next steps and determine what else we can do to engage into other conversations with other stakeholder groups. Again, could be our PTOs, could be boosters, it could be the city, it could be the township, it could be the foundation. I know other board members, both Mr. Newmoff and Mr. Bush and Mrs. Kalinowski, have all reached out to me individually to say, how do we get involved? How do we help? What do we need to do? So we're actively trying to sort through all of that to create some meaningful way to have a plan to present to the Board of Education to talk about what this looks like from a leadership perspective, of what we do specifically in our school district to help our students, help our families, and ultimately our staff, and everything that we do to enhance culture climate on our school campus. As I said at the last board meeting, we truly are stronger together. We are not going to solve everything associated to culture and climate on our school campus alone. We have to have partnerships with our students, so their student voice matters, with our staff, staff voice matters, parents, parent voice matters, and then our community at large, in addition to everyone else that works across our school campus for and in service to students. So we look forward to this work because I believe it actually will enhance our ability to fulfill our statement of purpose and truly help impact the culture and climate necessary to meet the needs of our kids. So for tonight, just a quick update. We have some things in the works behind the scenes that we're actively doing to try to forge a plan to bring forward based upon the wisdom and guidance that we receive from others as we basically walk this journey together. So I'm happy to answer any questions about anything that I've said. And that'll conclude my culture climate update for this evening.
Any questions? Comments? Okay, thank you, Mr. Sawyers. Next is an update from the Plain Local Education Association.
I do have one. Kristen Howell, Dana Kagris, and Leslie Shea completed the course Teaching Art Online through the Art of Education University, an accredited online school specifically for art teachers. This class helped them to curate instructional strategies, best practices, and technology options for teaching art online and design activities that promote engaging remote interaction for students. And Mary Cook is completing a course designed for educators seeking an advanced understanding of general chemistry content knowledge with consideration of how this understanding informs teaching and learning in College Credit Plus chemistry courses. The goal of this coursework is to work toward gaining the certification needed to explore an option of adding a College Credit Plus chemistry course at the high school.
Okay, thank you very much. Next on the agenda are discussion items, and first item up is board liaison reports. Anything for anyone to report tonight?
Nope.
If not, then we'll go to our next item, which is the PTO parent focus groups. Mr. Sawyers.
Thank you, President McClelland. I'm going to introduce Dr. Hamilton, Director of Secondary Ed, and Mr. Emery, Director of Elementary Education. They're going to present to the Board of Education and our public parents tonight information related to the PTO parent focus groups that we recently convened within our school district. Dr. Hamilton, Mr. Emery.
Thank you, Superintendent Sawyers, President McClellan, Vice President Darrow, members of the board. Appreciate the opportunity to share share an overview of our recent focus groups that we held with the PTOs throughout the district. And as you will recall, we conducted a parent survey in April regarding remote learning. And the results of that survey showed that there were three general trends. Parents wanted more student-teacher interactions, consistent expectations, and support. That as a result, as a follow-up, we held a series of building-based virtual, there we go. Okay, slide, we're right there, good. Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. Anyway, our survey, we held a series of building-based virtual focus groups hosted by the PTOs that were held on June 10th, 16th, and 17th. And the purpose was to obtain information to improve remote learning. We wanted to find out how we could better serve the educational needs of our students. So that was the purpose of the focus groups as a follow-up to this parent survey that we had in April. Focus groups consisted of a representative group of 10 to 20 parents from each building who participated in a discussion facilitated by the PTO presidents. Next slide, please. And these groups were limited in number, 10 to 20, as I said, so that all voices could be heard. Parents in each building were invited to provide feedback on 3 essential questions that were the same throughout the district. Focus groups in each building utilized the same group processing protocols, which we which we actually were able to use from other districts who had actually done similar kinds of protocols, and we then tweaked them and made them our own. So we were able to use what some other districts had used. Each parent had the opportunity to share for 2 minutes per question. Building principals and district administrators attended the virtual focus group meetings as observers and note takers. Next slide, please. So here are the 3 questions that we asked. We wanted to know, what did we do what did we do well? What worked for each family and their child as a learner? What did the students like best? Asked them to be specific if possible. We also asked, what can we do better from your perspective? And again, we asked from the child's perspective and to be as specific as possible. And finally, what one thing that you've not already shared would you like for us to consider and know about? Next slide, please. And so for the middle school and high school feedback, the results were fairly consistent between the middle school and high school, believe it or not. And these were the top 5 items that were mentioned by parents, and we tried to keep track with tally notes to determine how consistent these were and how often they were stated. And so the first one was receiving the week's assignments on Monday. They enjoyed, and their students enjoyed also having the assignments, so they knew what they were doing for the week. Also, they enjoyed the live instruction from teachers. That was very important and was pervasive throughout both middle school and high school, and really throughout the whole district, which we'll talk about later. They wanted to have consistency, and we can talk about that in a little bit. And I just lost my slide anyway. And then as far as the concerns, what could we do better? They wanted to have more live instruction, more video recordings. They wanted more consistency across teachers in the district in terms of expectation, structure, and in communication with students and parents. They liked having the lunch chats, which some teachers held, and or they said that's something we could do better, have more lunch chats, and then also we needed more structure.
Pardon me, I apologize for interrupting. Could we advance the slide? I'm not seeing, can you better?
Yes, I lost my my Zoom. I'm not seeing the slides at all, Becky.
Does anybody see the slides?
I can see the slides.
Yes.
Yes.
No, sorry, Shirley, that was great summary, but we weren't seeing the what can we do better?
Okay.
Actually, Becky, we're still seeing what can we now.
Oh, sorry, I can't say next slide because I can't see my screen anymore. So I'm trying to do the best I can. I apologize.
Absolutely.
So
Of course, we're all looking at the screen, which is why we're not looking at our cameras.
yes, okay. So as far as if we could go to the slide with question 3, additional items.
We're there.
Okay, thank you. What we determined additionally was that we need to strike a balance between structure and flexibility. The parents did not want to have students online all day long because they didn't feel that that was healthy. They want structure and consistency, but not online all day long. Then they also mentioned that the notifications and updates, even though they enjoyed receiving those, kind of became overwhelming. And so that was something we needed to look at. And then there were also concerns expressed about mental health issues and social interaction. So those were the middle school, high school items. And so next, Scott Emery will present about the PK through 6 feedback.
Scott,
Thanks,
can you,
thank you, Shirley.
Slide.
Yes, Becky?
Scott, can you see the slides?
Yes, I can see the slides. Thank you.
Mhm.
For the first slide, what went well? I think some of our elementary parents found that they enjoyed some of the flexibility of the remote learning. They mentioned their children might be ones that like to sleep in, and so therefore they like being able to do their work after a good morning's rest. Others are early risers and they wanted to get started right away. That was something they were pleasantly surprised by. What went well were those opportunities for engagement. Several parents mentioned the morning meeting, which is something that you'll see in the primary grades, where a teacher will get all the children together in a traditional school setting on the floor to sort of talk about the day. The teachers that were able to do that in a remote learning environment received some recognition from the parents that were part of the focus groups as being very appreciative of still providing that opportunity. Parents also mentioned any assignments that weren't reliant on technology were sort of a welcome break from remote learning. Next slide, Becky. But truly the focus of these conversations were really about what can we do better. As Dr. Hamilton mentioned, it was the same for elementary. Our parents in the focus groups really want more time for their children to interact with their teachers as well as their classmates. And this was across the board. They really feel if we're going to do remote learning again, there needs to be more real-time interaction between teacher and child. They really want us to put more of a focus on that. It was too much of a shift, according to the parents, to go from everyday interaction with their teacher in the traditional school setting to remote learning, where they might not see their teacher more than once or twice a week, and then only for a limited amount of time. So that's obviously something we need to focus on. But along with that increased real-time interaction, the parents warned not to let it only be for social interaction. They want to see more real-time instruction happening during remote learning. So when those teachers do schedule their Google Meets or Schoology conferences, they'd like to see instruction occurring during those times for the kids that are available, and then to have those lessons recorded for those children who may not be available at the time when the teacher is actually teaching. So that was a challenge. Another thing they asked us to do in regard to that particular point was to look for a more robust system than Google Meets. Some of the parents with experience with remote learning have suggested there's other tools out there that might do a better job to allow teachers to be more effective when delivering direct instruction through video conferencing. So I know that's something that Superintendent Sawyers and our Director of Technology, Michael Voss, have discussed with some other tools that we're now exploring. Another area we can improve is a greater variety of assignments, hands-on learning, things that take place outside. Really anything that can get kids away from a screen was something that the parents challenged us to do a better job of in the future if we were to continue remote learning. They understand technology is an important aspect to do this type of program, but it's really hard on their children to be on technology as much as they were since mid-March. Parents would like more feedback on their children's assignments. They said that it was frustrating the fact they didn't know if what was being uploaded into Schoology was high quality work, and they trust the teacher's professionalism for that type of feedback, to know if what their children were completing at home was in fact meeting or exceeding expectations. And if it wasn't, what could the parents be doing at home to help their children improve? That's something that they'd like to see us do better. And then finally, as Shirley suggested, just that organization and consistency. It really became frustrating for our parents to balance their work and home lives at the same time and trying to provide the amount of responsibility we were placing on them for instruction at home, particularly those parents with multiple children. They really would like to see more consistency between the grade levels, the buildings, and that we use Schoology more effectively, such as using the Schoology calendar function and those communication functions that might reduce the amount of emails and messages parents were receiving. So, we had a lot of great candid feedback. I would say those are the 5 areas that came through the most. And finally, what were some of the things from the elementary parents they wanted to share? Beyond those first 2 questions, there's a deep concern about the well-being of children if we continue with remote learning. They're very concerned that there's just a lack of meaningful interaction in remote as there would be at school. And I think that goes without saying. They're concerned about the lack of academic progress. In fact, some are concerned about regression in the core content areas if we continue. It goes without saying that our parents believe we have excellent teachers and they want their teachers to be teaching their children direct instruction in person. That's really what they're hoping for. And ideally in school, but if not, to a greater degree through video conferencing. And then finally, just concerns about young children from a social, emotional, and health perspective about being on technology so much in order to access the remote learning lessons and assignments that we prepared since mid-March. So as Shirley and I looked at what we learned from our different focus groups, we did find some commonalities. Parents really appreciated when we did live instruction. They appreciated any sort of advanced notice about what the expectations were, such as Shirley said was happening at the middle and high schools. And they kind of like the flexibility in having some control over time. I think, next slide, Becky, if you don't mind. In terms of improvement, as I suggested, and Shirley as well, more live instruction, more structure, more consistency, and then those concerns about their children's well-being if we continue with remote learning. So that's just sort of a broad overview of the different focus groups that we've been leading the past 2 weeks. I would like to thank our PTO presidents. The focus groups I observed, they did an outstanding job leading the parents into being really very, very honest in their answers. I had a lot of great feedback, and for that, I'm very grateful. So for questions, we do have several of our principals available as well, so they'll go online, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Scott and Shirley, thank you very much for the presentation. Appreciate the work put into the focus groups. I've heard from a number of parents after the focus groups as well, and they very much appreciated the opportunity to give feedback. I do think that this is top of mind for everybody. I mean, I'm not saying anything new. Everybody is worried about the fall. I think there's a tremendous hope that we're going to go back under a green light and that this will never, revert to where we were with the challenges of remote learning. But I appreciate and know that we've got to do everything we can to have a better experience and continue to educate our kids going forward, whatever is thrown our way. So I did have a couple of questions, but my first one is really just related to Scott, related to the primary school experience versus the intermediate school, and whether you felt like between those two groups there was any distinction with that really younger group versus those that are a little more mature in the intermediate school. Any different feedback there?
That's a great question, Paul. I think the biggest struggle with remote learning for me personally was how to meet the needs of our youngest learners that so truly need that interaction with a caring, loving teacher with high academic expectations. And obviously that would apply to all children pre-K through 12, but those youngest children that lack the independence, it was tough to be at home because of the varying amount of time that parents were available to assist. That came through in the focus groups. We had several parents that just said, based on their own work responsibilities, combined with the home responsibilities and educating other children, it really became difficult to give the amount of guidance that a 7-year-old may need throughout all the hours of academic work that was required during that day. I also think it was tough too, because at the ELC and the primary school, we've never used a learning management system. And so we really went from mid-March, not really considering Schoology, which is our learning management system, as something we needed to implement at the primary school or the ELC. And to Teresa Smith's credit and Principal Unger's credit, they were able to get that learning management system up and running just within a couple weeks. Now, certainly we didn't do it perfectly. We had feedback during the focus groups that parents had difficulty uploading assignments or making it to teachers or knowing where to find information, but we made great strides in that regard as the year progressed. Assistant Superintendent Lofton coordinated 3 days of professional development that we implemented to really get our teachers to be more consistent and more coordinated in how we're going to use Schoology if we need to use it for remote learning next year. But yeah, it was a challenge. I think K3 is really tough to do remote learning. But I'd also say the same about fourth grade. I think that's a really difficult year. I find fourth graders to be much more like third graders than I do fifth graders. And I think the independence of our fifth and sixth graders really shone through. And many of them were already used to using a learning management system, which I think worked to their advantage. Teresa or Katie, do you have anything you'd like to add about the experiences at your schools?
I would just echo what you said, Scott. I think that was, I mean, we were really trying to get up off the ground, learning Schoology, learning some of the features, getting teachers to be able to set up, you know, classes online so that families could have an opportunity to really look at it and not find that, you know, they were looking everywhere for, you know, assignments or how to upload work. We definitely have some improvements to do. I think the focus group gave us a lot of great suggestions on how to continue to improve remote learning for the future if we need it. So I was really glad to be able to attend and hear their thoughts about how their students liked it and didn't like it. And so, you know, I took a lot of notes. I'm ready if we have to do this again to move forward.
I would echo and agree with Mr. Emery's comments as well. I think many of our fifth and sixth grade teachers and students were much more familiar with Schoology than our fourth grade, with our fourth graders not taking home their iPads. Previously, we had some students that had used it for a handful of things in the classroom, but many who had not used it at home before. And so that's where a lot of our support and growth definitely came during remote learning, is supporting our fourth grade students and teachers. And definitely also with Teresa taking notes at that remote parent feedback group on ways we can improve in the future.
Well, thank you. And again, appreciate all the efforts. And I guess my sense is that overall with the concerns that were expressed, that, and obviously you all put this on in very short notice and triaged this thing and did a tremendous job to get what we could. Do we think that we'll have a very different, I've used the word very, it's not a great adjective, but very different looking system in the fall? Based on other best practices from other districts, other technologies, others who have done this remote learning as part of a, you know, I know the number of parents involved with other learning companies who have got some strong advice, I think, on how we can help improve. Do we envision being able to put up a different product for the fall?
Yeah, Paul, it needs to be. It didn't meet our parents' expectations. That was clear from the survey that Dr. Mamias helped develop, as well as the recent focus groups. I think the work that Superintendent Sawyers and Assistant Superintendent Lofton did in working with our teacher leaders at the end of the year for some common expectations going into next year are going to help us out tremendously. I feel some of the areas that we were most inconsistent on at the elementary level, Superintendent Sawyers and Assistant Superintendent Lofton worked through teacher leaders to address those concerns. So I feel like we can bring, and plus the PD that Mrs. Lofton prepared, I feel like we're going to go into fall in a much better place. One of the parents recommended those 3 days of PD we did at the end of the year. Maybe we should have done those at the very beginning. I thought that was an interesting comment, but a lot of what we did on the 3 days was reflection on what we'd learned since mid-March. And so I think the timing of it was helpful. You know, knock on wood, we won't have to implement this in the fall and we can have the boys and girls back on campus. But if we do, Paul, we'll have a much better product than what we delivered over the past 2 months.
And again, I appreciate all the effort that's going into it. And I know we're striving for better. And I also just think for your feedback was interesting to me. You know, the three things you mentioned: concern about mental health of our kids, concern about regression of learning, and also technology, too much technology. And I really think that's a difficult spot that I just want to acknowledge. It's not necessarily controllable by us. I mean, the mental health, I mean, I think, you know, I'm not at New Albany schools every day, but I'm a people person. It's hard for me to be online all the time with work. So that's a bit out of our control, but I know we're doing everything we can to make that part of the curriculum. And then being on too much technology, that is the nature of remote learning, right? We have to be on technology. This is our option right now. This is not something that we can necessarily, this is e-learning is where we're at. If we have to go back to that, and again, I know that we hope that we won't. And the flip side is we all want to continue the impressive learning progression that our kids are making. And our best tool, I think, right now is, if we're forced to do it, is going to be through technology and some of the challenges that come along with that, the mental health aspect of not seeing your friends and colleagues and peers. So again, I appreciate the spot that you're in. I'm glad you did the focus groups. I hope that that's the beginning of the discussion with, I know that you all did a listening session. There wasn't a lot of interaction necessarily from Dr. Hamilton, and Mr. Emmer, yourself, and the various groups that you did. So I know that there's very interested people in the community who want to help, and hopefully we can continue to get their feedback as we build this backup, what I hope is a backup plan for us going into the fall. So thank you.
I'm curious, and I appreciate Paul mentioning this. I mean, obviously, we're hoping this is a backup plan. I know that there are folks out there that have expressed concerns about all the discussions we've been having over the last couple of meetings about different scenarios for returning to school and the survey that went out, a number of things, and you know, people's concern about, well, you know, are you guys even trying to come back? Yes, we are, very much so. So just want to make that clear. But I'm curious, because I know we've had these parent discussions with PTO. You all have been working with teachers throughout this whole process. And of course, there's time now over the summer where we're, you know, continuing to work to prepare for the fall to come back like normal. But in a scenario where we would possibly have to go back to online learning, just curious as to what feedback you're getting from teachers about ways that they can better interact with students. And I know it's probably a lot different at the elementary levels than it is at the middle school, high school level. But I'd be curious to hear about what their feedback was as to how we can be doing better to make sure that our kids are getting every opportunity they can online to achieve.
I can speak from the middle school, high school, and then if Mrs. LeBeau would like to add something, that would be great as well. When we talked with teachers throughout the PD experiences, and then Mr. Kramer actually conducted a survey with the teachers, and he did one with students as well during the remote learning time. And Mrs. LeBeau also conducted a survey with students and asked her teachers for input as well. And so we found that teachers, I think PD is very important, and I think it is with the parents as well. They mentioned that, and I think the teachers were very appreciative of the professional development for the 3 days, as Scott mentioned, that we conducted. And the one thing that teachers said, though, was that they also want some organization. They want structure. They want more live instruction. They understand the value of the interaction, live interaction with the students, and the importance of that. And so I believe that through the hours that the board graciously provided for teachers this summer, that they are, and the PD that we're offering, this will help teachers understand the various types of tools that they can use in their lesson planning that will provide more interaction and more valuable, meaningful experiences and learning for students. So Mrs. LeBeau, do you have anything you'd like to add from your perspective and your survey that you conducted?
Sure. We had over 500 responses from our student survey. And so we unpacked some of that data, a lot of that data, during the 3 PD days. But we also are in a good place in that we have parents who have students in children in New Albany. So they're not only teachers, but parents of New Albany students, and also parents and teachers in New Albany, but have students in other districts. And so we had lots of discussion about what we can do better as whole group, and the live instruction was huge, and the scheduled with flexibility was huge. And it was reaffirming to hear that our parents want more of that as well, because our teachers want more of that as too.
So from your perspective, what would you say, and maybe I'm a little head here and we need more time to unpack all of this, but what have you learned from this experience, or what do you think that the teachers have learned from this experience that actually will be useful this fall when we're back in the classroom? But number one, always with that kind of cloud hanging over your head as to whether or not you may have to go back. But even if not, what would be some of the new things we've learned about how we can deliver education in a better way, even when they're in the classroom?
Well, I was just going to say, I'll say one thing and then whoever else wants to respond can. I think blended learning, that was really the focus of our 3 days for professional development. And I think blended learning is very important for the fall, so that we are prepared to, we can do online learning within the classroom. And then we will also be prepared in a blended learning model. And we will also be prepared for if we have to go to any sort of hybrid or totally remote learning. So I think we're planning for the transition and to do a better job in the classroom as well as outside the classroom with online learning and blended learning. So if somebody else wants to comment on that.
I think our teachers have really learned how important the learning is social. There's a huge social aspect of learning, and it's so important. And so when they come back, when we're all back together, that to use that time in a way that prepares kids for the blended aspect, should we have to go to that, as Dr. Hamilton said, but also to really cherish that time with our kiddos. And because as they missed it as much as the kiddos did.
I think the teachers also really learned and collaborated about ways to personalize and support kids where they are in a blended learning model. So whether that's using Schoology conferences in a breakout room setting, to have kids be whole group and then break off into groups based on their particular needs and collaborate. I think there was a lot of learning from their colleagues on those 3 days that I think that'll really help us in the fall as well. And I would agree that building their technology and collaboration skills right from the get-go, no matter what our setting is, will really help us in the fall and next year as well.
Yeah, and I would just add to, I think we have a real opportunity at the primary to really engage our learners in, these are our youngest learners, right? So building them to be able to do blended learning using, station rotations, really showing them how to use technology. I know kids have a lot of knowledge about that, but the idea that hopefully we will be one-to-one at the primary in the fall, and teaching kids how to log in to class links. I think that was one of the comments we heard from the focus groups, is that our youngest learners still need a lot of support. And so one of the things I think we will do as a staff coming back into the building in the fall is really try to build some independence, to say, with our youngest learners, so that if we do have to move to a remote learning opportunity, the kids feel confident and that they can actually participate in online learning as well. So we've got some work to do with our young ones, but it's definitely a goal that we're up to as a staff. I think the staff too has come a long way with technology. We've still got some learning to do with that. We've seen some great collaboration over the last couple months with some of our staff who find that technology may not always be their friend, but now it's getting closer and closer. And so we want to continue to build their skills so that our kids get the best from them. With the PD that the district is offering, I think we have some great opportunities out there.
Are there any other questions or comments?
I just want to say, I think the focus groups really provided some valuable feedback for us to be able to use in our planning. And I really appreciate as Scott said, the PTO presidents facilitating these meetings, organizing and facilitating. They did a wonderful job, and we appreciate the involvement of our parents. And as you know, we're conducting additional surveys as we go throughout the summer. So I really appreciate the PTO support.
I would echo the same, and really was an opportunity to try to engage parent voice in a different way within the school district. We needed to come back and actually reflect upon the changes that were implemented during the remote learning opportunities that took place in the spring in the 3 different phases, because there was a phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 that ultimately ended the school year. So we did make changes after each phase to basically take the feedback we received from students, staff, and or parents to try to incorporate change to be just in time to respond to the needs of our kids and what parents were telling us that would work better, and then try that out to see if it did work. So taking the time to press pause and actually go and do focus groups and listen to that feedback, because we had conducted a survey already during the remote learning that parents had an opportunity to respond to midway, but then we made some changes and needed to know what responses would come. So instead of doing another survey, because we do get feedback about survey fatigue, and we knew there was a survey that we had to do in relationship to reset and restart for school for August to give scenarios and ask specific questions to families. So this was a way for us to stop, press pause, and get information from our families in a different way by engaging the PTOs, which we are grateful for doing, to solicit diversification from their parent groups of different types of households, single parent to blended to shared parenting to standard 2 kids and a dog. And 2 kids, a dog, and the white picket fence, to have a conversation to talk about what it meant for their perspective, to help us understand. We have 2 working adults in the house, and I don't have a working adult in the house. So what did that mean for the different types of experiences our kids had? So we do value that. I will tell you as a board, you know this, but also for our community, we're taking the feedback that was received from the survey we actually conducted during remote learning, then the focus groups, to actually inform the planning that we're doing for the fall should it become necessary based upon transition, in this case from a green-based environment into a yellow-based environment that would require part-time blended, part-time school attendance, to full-blown red, where we have to stay home because of a resurgence and stay-at-home order that would be issued by the governor that would basically close schools again. So if we have to transition from green to yellow or yellow to red, as we go through that process, we have information to prepare for what that will become as we look towards 2020-21. But we do appreciate the feedback and thank everyone for their participation to date in this process.
Yeah, thank you all. Appreciate it. Speaking of the school year starting in the fall, that's the next item, the Reset Restart program.
So this is deliberate in order. So we're going to follow up from where we left off at our last Board of Education meeting. I'm not going to do a full-blown presentation tonight. I just want to go through and provide some updates. We gave a very comprehensive overview of the planning that had been conducted to date at our last Board of Education meeting, and it's still available through the YouTube channel on the school district website for people to access if they want to see everything that was presented in a green, yellow, and or red option for kids to come back to school. So tonight, I want to focus on the work that has continued, provide a few updates, and talk about next steps in anticipation of our July 9th board meeting, where I think that we will have our plans available to share with our parents and our community at large for what we anticipate August 2021 will be, or August 2020 through ultimately May 2020 will be for the 2020-21 school year, pending again things that change that are out of our control related to health crisis in New Albany, in Ohio, or in America, depending on what else comes with the future of COVID. So tonight I want to share that we're continuing to actively brainstorm, vet, and prepare options for 2021. That is still work that the administrative team is doing, and we get new information every single day from someone. So it's either from the Ohio Department of Health with an anticipated requirement for consideration and what will this mean within your environment if you had to implement it, if the Franklin County Public Health District said it was a requirement, or a guideline or a recommendation, specific academic related tasks from the Ohio Department of Education. So we're vetting all that information as it's received, but I will tell you the health side of it is probably the most frustrating because it's changing constantly and we still don't have all of the information that's required in order for us to basically make the informed choices for what it actually will be on our school campus. Most of that relates to the social distancing requirement, because if social distancing of 6 feet is mandated in any way, then it will dramatically change student attendance for 2020-21. Presently, I do not anticipate that social distancing will be a requirement to start school in August. It could become a requirement as the school year progresses. So we might start in August and face new circumstances in November that then change again in January, that change again in March. So the plans that we will be implementing, as I said at the last Board of Education meeting, and we will present these most likely at the July 9th meeting, will show the agility that's necessary to be fluid to go from one stage to the next should it become required. However, there's a few new options that we also believe will become available based upon changes in state statute based upon action by the governor last Friday. So I'll talk about those in just a minute. We're anxiously awaiting confirmation from the health department and Governor DeWine specifically on the health requirements or guidelines that will be required for 2020-21. And again, that makes a significant difference in what I'm saying. If it is a requirement, it will be adhered to. If it is a guideline, it will become a local decision between the administration, Board of Education, and Franklin County Public Health Department. Presently, based upon all the information I'm hearing, I believe Governor DeWine will announce tomorrow, Tuesday, or Thursday this week, so either Tuesday or Thursday, what those requirements or guidelines will be for anticipation of August, pending changes in what's happening from a health-related circumstance in the state of Ohio. So I do believe we will find out this week what those requirements, recommendations, or guidelines will be that will inform our next steps and permit us to publish information in our next meeting on July 9th. I do continue to meet weekly with all Central Ohio superintendents. So we're actively discussing plans and questions we have in relationship to face-to-face, the logistics of face-to-face, school safety protocols, health and safety requirements, what you're doing in your specific school or campus to keep staff and kids safe on a daily basis, the protocols associated to logistics from transportation to food service to custodial maintenance and grounds, what we're specifically doing for cleaning protocols, what the CDC recommendation is versus what the Ohio Department of Health recommendation is, and which one we're going to adhere to, and what does that mean on a daily basis in moving kids in, about, or around your school building or school campus. All those things are happening on a weekly basis. And unfortunately, every week or every other day, we get a new piece of information that changes the work that has occurred. And then we have to pivot and take the next step to be agile in the plan. So we are actively doing that in cooperation with the other Central Ohio school districts, as well as the Franklin County Public Health District. Last Friday, we had a parent survey that did close in their school district. We had 2,724 respondents. From our parent population. We're very grateful for all of the parents that actively participated in the parent survey. As you can imagine, we are actively reading all of the information that's been provided by the parents. In addition to the questions that were answered, we provided open-ended text box opportunities for parents to basically give us additional information, explanation, or clarification of something they wanted us to understand. To benefit their student, to benefit their family, or to benefit the school district as a whole. We received thousands of those comments, and every administrator in the school district is reading every open-ended text box response to every single question that was provided. So we have been actively reading those since the official closure. As a preview, because it's going to impact part of what I'm going to share this evening, I will tell you that approximately 80% of our parents in our school district said in the survey that if the New Albany Plain Local School District is able to open school in August on the first day of school with enhanced safety protocols related to hygiene, hand washing, hand sanitization, maybe some limited movement of kids, depending on what the requirement or recommendation may be for how kids travel in groups throughout the building and have contact with others. 80% of our parent population said, if you can implement some hygiene requirements to help meet the safety protocols that may be required by the state, my child will return to school. 80% of our parent population said, my kid is coming back. Now, With that said, and it goes to one of Mr. Newmoff's questions as to why the focus groups were very important for us to basically follow up on, it's in relationship to remote learning. Also as a preview to July 9th, because this directly impacts the planning we're doing as a leadership team to update our plans based upon everything that we've already prepared. 30% of the parent respondents, there were 2,724 respondents, 30% or 817 said, if you tell me there is a 100% remote learning online opportunity for my child for next year, I am going to go online. So we have 80% that want to return for in-person with increased hygiene protocols, and 30% of the respondents, or 817, said, I would select a 100% remote option if it's permissible by state statute, which leads to what happened. So pending any new information that we receive from Governor DeWine or the Ohio Department of Health, I currently anticipate that we absolutely will have the opportunity to return to school in August, 100% for students if they would so choose, with some increased hygiene protocols that will be mandated unless the governor or the Ohio Department of Health tells us otherwise. So when that announcement comes out, we will adhere to whatever those requirements are. If they're recommendations, we will talk about them actively with the Franklin County Department of Health. We will create plans, but as it stands tonight, I believe students will have the option to come back to the school campus with hygiene protocols that will have to be enhanced. In addition to that, Ohio Revised Code, as of last Friday, through the passage of and signing by the governor, House Bill 164, now provides local boards of education the opportunity to create a remote learning plan for the 2020-21 school year based upon COVID-19. So we will have an opportunity as a school district to engage in conversations with the board and our families to talk about what a remote learning environment could look like. To Mr. Newmoff's question, it will not be the same of what happened between March 16th and the end of the school year. It will be much more rigorous. It will be an entire curriculum that would be required potentially to be completed if a parent would elect to say, I choose 100% remote. I choose not to send my child to school for the 2020-21 school year. I choose to be 100% online. If that would happen, they'd have to complete an entire school year online, potentially, through a third-party resource or through curriculum programming that we specifically determine as a school district. The leadership team's currently working on that in cooperation with several other school districts to talk about how to best meet those learning needs. Not every teacher in our school district clearly went to school to become an online teacher. Teaching online is not the same as teaching face-to-face. However, I will say, and we didn't talk about this during the parent focus group, it didn't come up, but I'm going to say it, that we did have several students in our school district that were very successful in an online environment. They may now consider an online environment as a better solution for their individual needs, depending on what's happening within their family unit. As such, we have a responsibility to ensure that whatever online experience we would agree to will meet the quality and the rigor that we would expect our students to be successful in completing every single day to fulfill our statement of purpose. So the Board of Education will likely receive a recommendation on July 9th as part of our plan to talk about how to give access, now that the statute actually permits it, to families to opt into a 100% online academy if they would so choose for the 2020-21 school year. There's a lot of things that come with that we are actively working through, from staffing to curriculum to logistics to cost and everything else associated to it. So we are working on that now that House Bill 164 is now an option within the state of Ohio because the governor signed it Friday. In addition to that, for the face-to-face interaction, I would go back to, because we did receive some follow-up questions about hygiene and disinfecting. Presently, I'm going to tell you it's hand washing, hand sanitization, specifically on a routine basis with a frequent schedule that students will be required to do during the student day. So they will have to wash their hands. They will have to use hand sanitizer. Hand washing is still preferred. But if all the kids are back on campus that choose to come back to campus that we're able to host, we will have to talk about how hand washing occurs because there's a lot of kids in our school district. There will be no sharing of school supplies. So parents have already started asking questions at the building level specifically about that because there's several school supplies in specific grade levels that become community shared. That will likely not be permitted in any way from Franklin County Public Health. Students' markers, colored pencils, scissors, pencils, pens, everything will become their own. They will not be sharing it with other students because of the cleaning requirements that would have to be implemented. In addition to that, there's new robust cleaning environment or cleaning protocols that will be required across the entire school district environment that we anticipate we will have to implement. Students will also probably be, as will teachers and other staff members, helping with those cleaning protocols to try to help keep everyone safe within our school district based upon what we're currently hearing from Franklin County Public Health and what that potentially looks like across our school district. Additionally, as I've said previously tonight, and I also said it at our last board meeting, everything we do has to be flexible and we have to be agile to be able to respond within 24 hours of something happening. So every plan that we have built in this school district gives us the ability to transition, hopefully within 24 hours notification, from a specific phase or stage to a new phase or stage based upon whatever happens with COVID-19 and any resurgence that would be required or health order that would be issued that we would be responsible to comply with. Again, we've built those plans, but we are working through them now to make adjustments based upon continued information that will have to be adjusted yet again once we find out whatever the governor or the Ohio Department of Health issues, either as a guideline, a recommendation, or a requirement, because each one of those will have different expectations for us to implement within the required plans that we're building to bring kids back to school. But at the end of the day, for now, those models have been created. We will adjust them based upon whatever those health restrictions come, and we will provide opportunities as I currently know it. Kids will have two choices with their families. Number one, green with increased hygiene protocols to return to the school campus on a daily basis to participate in their academic learning and the socialization that comes with school for 2020-21 until a point in time, if ever, that a health order would change our ability to permit that to happen. That's the first choice for August. The second choice I anticipate that families will have is if you are uncomfortable at this stage for a variety of reasons, health, medical, social, emotional, whatever the reason may be, I believe families will have the opportunity to elect to be 100% online if they so choose because of the passage of House Bill 164 that's now state law in the state of Ohio. It went through as an emergency measure. So we will present a remote learning opportunity to the board for their consideration for enactment to provide that to families. And currently, as I said in the survey data, 30% of the respondents said that they would consider that once we had additional information to share with them to define what would that be. So lastly, I would just say the detailed plans, the communications and more will be presented most likely by or at our July 9th Board of Education meeting. It depends on what information is confirmed this week from the governor and the Ohio Department of Health. He did announce last week that it would be within 10 days. The press conferences are scheduled for Tuesday and Thursday this week at 2 p.m. We anticipate it will happen this week. I don't know for a fact that it will. We do not get advance notification. We find out at the press conference like everyone else. So when we find out, you find out. So the one thing I will ask in advance for is patience, that when you hear whatever is announced, please know we do not have an immediate answer to everything that is announced because we do not know what the announcement's going to be. We have to have the time to reflect upon the announcement and figure out what does it mean logistically, operationally, academically, and more for our students and our families. We are absolutely committed to bringing students that wish to be here back in August as much as we possibly can, for as long as we possibly can, provided we're allowed to do it, which I currently believe we will be allowed to do it. But we also must be prepared that if things change and something happens that impacts the health of our city, state, nation, and everything else, and a health order does change, we will be responsible for whatever that health order is and must act immediately to then take action to comply. But for right now, we will continue to work with Franklin County Public Health, our COVID-19 task force in New Albany, our associations from the Plain Local Education Association and OPSI, because of the staff implications associated to all the plans that we're creating. We're waiting for the governor's order, and once we have it, we'll sit down and have conversations about how to effectuate this moving forward with everyone's input to meet the needs of our kids. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're committed to do. We absolutely will create learning opportunities that best meet the needs of our kids based upon the available information. So I'm going to stop for now. That's a preview of coming attractions, and answer any questions or listen to comments Board of Education members have.
Michael, I'll just jump in. I just want to thank you for that very transparent message. Hopefully everybody out there in the district appreciates it as well. You know, this is hard, right? The situation is extremely fluid. We don't have all the answers. We're not in control of all the answers, the guidelines, the requirements. But what's also really important is that we do need to build rigor in everything that we're doing as a district to make sure that we can be flexible and agile as the situation evolves. The one thing we know is that everybody has a different opinion on what is the best way to approach the 2021 school year. We saw that just from the little bit of data you gave out about the parent surveys, right? 80% said, hey, we'll all go back to school. 30% said we'll take online. Clearly, there's 10% of the parents out there that are happy to just be easy and go whatever way with us, because that's 110%. So thanks to those 10% that are willing to just make things easy for us. But the great thing here, and you know, going back to the really good information that Shirley and Scott shared, is that there's tremendous collaboration going on. You know, I love what the PTO did with the parents. We've had a tremendous amount of community involvement and voice, trying to help share, you know, their vision, how they would like things done. And so just this collaboration and partnership across everybody involved in the district has been fantastic. We want to continue to hear that. And, you know, I think you wrapped it up perfectly by just saying, you know, we're just waiting for the rest of the answers. You know, give us a chance to breathe when we do get that final information. But, you know, we are doing our best to really help everybody get the experience they want when we can go back and when we know what that looks like. So Michael and team, everybody, you know, really appreciate the effort that's going on.
Thank you.
I share Mike's thoughts as well. I have a question about, for those who choose online entirely, have we had many discussions yet as to how that will be, how standards will be upheld? Will there be exactly the same testing requirements, exactly the same grading requirements, exactly the same everything for online as there is for in-person?
So that's a to be determined. From a standpoint that we're currently evaluating, and I'll just use an example, third-party resources that actually would permit a student to actively complete curriculum requirements at his or her own pace through a third party versus doing what we did in a different way, in a more robust, rigorous way, offering our curriculum through our teachers at our pace online. So we have to look at both aspects of it to figure out what best meets the needs of kids, because I think we'd be irresponsible not to consider any and all options that could be available to kids. It's much like looking at College Credit Plus as an option for students versus AP versus I want to take an honors class at the high school. So each portion of that curriculum looks different based upon how it's implemented and how kids get access to it. So we're trying to determine what options, if any, should we bring forth that are in the best interest of kids, that could provide different options to families based upon what best meets the needs of their child. Because going back to our statement of purpose, we're trying to meet the needs of each student. And a one-size-fits-all online solution may not be our only choice. So we're trying to determine that now in order to sit down and talk about that with our associations and with other school districts to talk about what are you planning to do that you might have an idea that better meets the needs of kids, because we're going to have about 2 weeks to finalize whatever it is we're going to do, because we'll present it to the board. And as it currently stands, if everything goes as I presently understand it, we will have until July 31st to submit the final plan to the Ohio Department of Education for the 2020-21 school year if we provide those types of learning opportunities for our kids, which right now I would tell you, I think we should. So I will take a public position. I think that we do need to create the remote learning opportunity for a student in our school district that is asking to be 100% online. And many of them could have a family situation that is medical in nature that just doesn't prevent them to come or present them the opportunity to come back to school until they get that. So we are assessing third-party curriculum that's aligned to state standards and national standards, both at the elementary and secondary level, that meets ACT, SAT requirements, that meets NCAA eligibility requirements. There's a lot of things that go into all of this. And to Mr. Newmoff's point early on in one of his comments that he made during Mr. Emery and Dr. Hamilton's presentation, our public school district didn't become an online academy. There are other experts out there that do online school and do online school extremely well. Should we replicate that environment? Yes or no? I don't know. We haven't learned enough about all those environments to know what's best for each kid. Or should a kid have a choice and maybe have different options based upon his or her needs that a family sits down and talks about? That's a long list of stuff that I will tell you members of the leadership team are actively combing through daily because our timeline is definitive. We don't have a lot of time. So I anticipate that health order is going to come out as a guideline. All of the power is going to come back to the local Board of Education working to submit a plan to Franklin County Public Health that then we will have to submit a plan to the Ohio Department of Education. I currently believe that's where we're going, Phil. And honestly, we need to create options that best meet the needs of every kid.
And I really have no problem with any of that. I think that makes good sense. Your reasoning is sound as usual. The very first part of our statement of purpose is create a culture of accountability. So while I support all of the learning that you're doing now and studying options and considering what those options may be, look, as long as the accountability component remains a key component of what we're doing, I think that flexibility is terrific. I think we're taking advantage of the opportunity to create some new paths for kids, and I think that's great as long as there's accountability.
And I believe the accountability will be there because the way the statute is written, the student is still enrolled in the New Albany Plain Local School District. If we choose to host the online remote environment, then we're providing the student access to that environment. They're still full-time enrolled. It's not as if the student is withdrawing from the school district to go to a charter school for a year, and then that would be separate from us. They would be outside of our school district. This is literally a remote learning environment within our school district, so they will still be responsible to adhere to whatever our expectations are. And should we go to a third party to facilitate that, they would still have to be compliant with what our expectations would be. And again, I don't have that answer yet. We're still doing that work, but I do believe, much like College Credit Plus, honors classes, AP classes, working with students with disabilities, working with our ELL population for English language learners. We have a wide spectrum of different options available to meet the needs of our kids. And I view this as really similar, that it's one more opportunity that we have to create based upon the needs of students to facilitate their learning needs, but at the same time, to hold ourselves and them accountable for what would be required.
Sure. The difference between 100% online and College Credit Plus and AP and all and even programs for disabled students is that those are exceptions to the general rule. The general rule has this entire curriculum that has been built up over many years, and that foundational curriculum is critical to the success of our students. So while I agree that there's lots of exceptions, it's that core curriculum that I think is so important, that we assure that no matter what model individual kids use, there is still the accountability throughout to make sure that they are getting the knowledge, right? I mean, far too often we lose sight of the role of a public school, a public primary and secondary school, which is frankly to impart foundational knowledge, right? It's to teach reading, it's to teach writing, it's to teach math. It really is to impart foundational knowledge. As you get into later grades, it's a lot of other things, but its primary role is to impart that foundational knowledge. And I just want to make sure that we never lose sight of that.
I agree.
From a practical standpoint, Mr. Sawyers, I'm thinking, it's great that we're exploring all of these different options, because I would think it was one thing when everybody on campus was no longer on campus and you had teachers and their classes that were already in existence. But in the scenario you describe, and there are, I don't know, obviously if it's close to 20 or 30% that would go online, you're still in a situation where you could have, in a class of however many kids we have in third grade right now, a very smaller number that decide to go online, which may or may not warrant one of our teachers going full-time online. So I'm just curious as to, I'm guessing that's part of the thought process here as it relates to how we deliver this. I mean, in some cases, we may not even have enough students moving online to move a teacher online, correct?
No, I would tell you based upon, and again, it's preliminary data because parents haven't had to sign on the dotted line that says I'm absolutely choosing this. You said you would be interested in a survey. So hypothetically, use your example that if there's 50 second grade students that want to be online, that's 2 classrooms of students minimally. So if it's 24 students in a second grade class, it's 50 kids, 48's 2 sections, round numbers. So if that's 2 less sections of second grade, do we automatically put 2 second grade teachers into an online environment? We have to create that. Our teachers didn't go to school per se to be an online teacher. They're learning how to do that. But that's a conversation we have to have about how do you meet academic and social emotional needs of that student? And what does that look like based upon the numbers in a specific grade level? And although we have an incredible faculty and they did a yeoman's job and were heroic in everything that happened from March to the end of the school year, I don't know yet. We're in the process of developing staff surveys that ask teachers, if this opportunity actually existed, is this a job you would be interested in doing? Because I don't know if they are or they're not. We haven't found that out yet because we were hopeful to ask more specific questions in our staff survey, because we have a draft ready to go that we've held, hoping that the governor was going to announce last week what the health, whatever regulations, guidelines, requirements, or recommendations would be, so we could change a few of the staff questions, because there's a few specific things we need to know from staff members. And rather than, again, survey fatigue, doing 2 separate surveys, we're hopeful to do 1 survey either at the end of this week or beginning of next, after we talk to the associations based upon what we learned from the governor. So to your point, yes, there's an impact of what potentially could happen. Right now in the survey data, again, if parents would actually choose, there would be multiple students from every grade level that would have an opportunity to participate online. And actually that was the surprising piece so far in the survey data that we've received from the parents initially. And again, it's 2,724 respondents out of, if it's just one per household, out of 5,100 potential households. So, and I don't know if there's more than one parent in a household that did or didn't answer the survey because we didn't track anything. We don't know the family, the unit, if it's one per household, two per household. We don't know that. So there's additional information that we would have to obtain from families in very short order between July 9th and probably the end of July to say, if you seriously want to do this, you're going to have to commit, because we're going to have to figure out how to either staff it using our internal staff after we go through a posting process to talk about what those positions are that would become available in an online environment, or determine, to Phil's point, or part of the point that I interpreted from Phil, that if there's an online academy that's been doing high quality online instruction for a decade that is tried and true and produces results, should that be an option that we consider for our kids, and then determine how to better meet the needs of our kids differently within our school district if we have to transition from green to yellow to red in a different way. So that's part of the work, to your point, President McClellan, that we're doing, is to have those conversations about what are the iterations of this that best meet the needs of kids in this agile system that we have to build, knowing right now, if I use the higher ed model, by Thanksgiving, things could shut down because of the start of the flu season that might go till Valentine's Day. So if that's the reality, then how do we transition in those models? But at the same time, during whatever duration of time school would be closed, if it would be required, then how do we transition back to a red environment and be successful through our fluidity and agility that we've created in that online environment for kids? It's very complicated. We have flow charts out the flow charts. We have models that we have a lot of stuff, and it's just hard to go through every different scenario because every day we get another piece of information that derails something that we thought was really good. And now we have a whole new wrinkle that we have to figure out to then twist and go through a different turn to get to where we need to be to better meet the needs of kids. But we're committed to doing it. It's just that it's relentless from a standpoint that we keep doing it over and over and over again because we keep getting new information, which is going to happen, but we need some initial rules. And we call them the guardrails, is kind of the conversation amongst the superintendents. When we're on the phone with the health commissioners, we've been very clear, as with the governor's office, we need the initial guardrails. We can't commit until you give us some guardrails. Tell me, is social distancing required, yes or no? If you take that off the table, I got all kinds of other options. If you tell me it's on the table, I'm in yellow right out of the gate. 50% of our kids are coming on Tuesday and Wednesday, and 50% of the kids are coming on Thursday and Friday. I have to know, is social distancing a guardrail or not? I have to know, can I have a group greater than 50 at any point in time, anywhere in the school? That's a guardrail. Can I have more than one kid on a bus seat? That's a guardrail. So I need that initial information in order to move forward because it dramatically changes our immediate responses to what we do to meet the needs of kids. So absent those guardrails, we keep shooting in the dark. We have great plans, but I don't know which one we can actually implement because we don't know what the guardrails are.
Well, I guess that's the point. And you've said it, so I don't really need to repeat it, but just, letting the community understand the complexity here. Because, let's just go back and think about the online idea. I'm guessing that if someone chooses to go online, it's got to be at least for, if not the year, for a semester, because once you've made that decision, then that trickles down to busing, right? Then that trickles down to classroom sizes, and on and on and on it goes based on the one decision that somebody makes.
Correct. It changes absolutely everything.
Well, we'll wait and see what the governor has to say. Does anybody else have a comment or a question?
Well, Michael, I think you just would reiterate, you're absolutely right. And your pounding on the tables coming through on the audio. So I know that we need these answers. I hope that we get them. That's a good thing, right? I hope that we get this clarity because we are can only do as much as we're limited by the direct clarity from the state right now. And clearly, I know we have a plan to help the other 20% who want to go an alternative route. So really appreciate all the effort. And let's hopefully reiterate John's point. Let's get some clarity here, hopefully tomorrow.
I do apologize if I pounded on the table.
It was emphatic. It was good.
It was warranted. All good.
All right, let's move on to, even though there's been a lot of discussion, we now are on our discussion items. Actually, I take that back. We're beyond discussion items. We're to public participation. Any public participation submitted today?
I
Ms.
did
Jenkins?
not receive anything.
Okay.
Well, we received an email from a local physician that has kids in the district. Does that, I mean, do they have to submit it as public participation or?
Yes, they were supposed to submit it to Mr. McClelland as public participation.
I know there was, that's a good point, Phil, there. I mean, people do send us emails, and I believe that one went to the entire board. Typically though, it is requested that you state that it is for public participation.
I know that he, on at least 2 occasions, he wanted to come to the next board meeting and speak his piece. And so he sent it in as an email. So.
Well, I think we can discuss it here. Do you have it in front of you?
I can.
And if you don't, I mean, I don't have it in front of me, but if you would like to summarize it, that's fine with me.
I did not receive it, or I would send it to everyone.
So this is from a local physician. His name is Dr. Joel Anders, and he and I have had several conversations. And for those who remember my comments about this last meeting, we're clearly on the same page. The bottom line is that that kids are at such low risk. These are his words, are at such low risk for serious harm from this disease that it's not worth restructuring their education, extracurricular activities, and social lives. As examples, he says more healthy kids in Ohio will die this month of hammock accidents than of COVID-19. Kids under 15 are more likely to be struck by lightning than die from COVID-19. And various other examples. But the bottom line is he and the other physicians that he associates with believe that we should have a return to school without delay and without restriction, and suggested that all who consent to return to school sign a waiver agreeing to release the school from liability for whatever may happen as it relates to COVID-19. He does also go on to say that the best we can do is to offer choices, which is really very much in line with what Superintendent Sawyers and the rest of his team have outlined here this evening, and to offer choices and let parents decide. That's the gist of it. If there are specific questions that I can try to answer, I would answer just from his writing. It's a fairly lengthy piece, so I don't think it would fit into the 5-minute restriction for public participation anyway. But that is the gist of it. So if you want me to read it, I will in its entirety. I can probably read it fast enough to make it in 5 minutes.
Well, I believe all board members did receive the email. I see Mr. Bush nodding his head. Mr. Newmoff, did you receive it as well? Okay. So maybe at some point someone could respond to him. I guess one question, I know this is not typical of public participation. Mr. Sawyers, just out of curiosity, and I'm guessing this might have to be something that's probably done through legislative action. I know that they are working on legislation to indemnify businesses, but would there be any legal issue that would have to be addressed for something like that waiver to be signed?
So I would tell you it's a conversation that attorneys are having. You're correct that there would have to be a change in Ohio Revised Code for indemnification for schools because the conversation is localized to businesses, not for profit or school districts specifically. We did implement a waiver for student participation in coming back for the training sessions that are being held for skills training for participation in interscholastic sports for grades 7 through 12 that are coming back onto the school campus specifically for training. That was at the recommendation of council. So to your point, absent something that happens specifically in Ohio Revised Code, the board attorneys will have to have that conversation like all other school districts to figure out what, if anything, does get implemented. There have been numerous requests to the General Assembly and the governor's office to address this specific issue for indemnification purposes, but I can't tell you that that will or won't happen. Currently, I don't anticipate that will be in place for August, clearly based upon the recess of the General Assembly. So I don't know what the attorneys are going to do with that, but it is on their radar.
All right, thank you.
Just one other couple of sentences that I think are really important to hear from Dr. Anders is, and I quote, "Our children need interaction with other children and with adults who care for them. This isolation and fear is far more detrimental to our children than this virus. COVID-19 poses next to zero risk for our children, yet they're already being groomed to fear physical contact and uncovered faces." And you know, I get that we have to do whatever the law says that we must do, but to the extent we have choices, clearly the view of Dr. Anders and his colleagues is that those choices err on the side of letting kids be kids and come to school and have regular school. There's also an outstanding piece that is available publicly from one of the largest children's hospitals in Canada. I love the fact that they name their hospital Sick Kids because it's so Canadian to be so direct. But it's Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto, and they put out the guidance that essentially mirrors Dr. Anders' comments that in their view, these are all physicians who take care of kids. Kids belong in school.
Thank you, Mr. Darrow.
Thank you.
Moving on to treasurer's items tonight. Could I get a motion on treasurer's items A through C?
So moved.
Mr. Newmoff, and a second.
Second.
Mr. Bush. Ms. Jenkins.
Thank you. I'll start with financials. Real estate collections are complete. We were within 0.1% of our estimates. I don't expect any additional money there. We were about $48,000 less than what I anticipated. Income tax sharing agreement, we actually did not receive the May payment. It was received in June, so we'll see how that all works out at the end. They typically pay like the last day of the month, so didn't quite make it. So that's a timing variance. State Foundation, I want to talk a little bit about House Bill 164. It did limit the amount of reduction for the school district. So if you remember when we talked about the 5-year forecast, we were looking at $865,000 of a reduction. After the state did their calculations, we're actually down to about $541,000 reduction in state aid. So that helps us by about $324,000. Still no guidance on what's going to happen in fiscal 21. So I don't expect that we need to update the 5-year forecast. I don't believe that this is material. It's a one-time amount of money. And hopefully by October, we'll have a little better sense of what's happening with State Foundation. But you will continue to see a variance in that line on the financials. And then all other and when we get down to the expenditure side, we're under in every area. The one area, purchase services, so part of the expenditures in that line come from the State Foundation payments. So those like tuition, other districts, it's college credit plus payments, those kinds of things, charter school payments. So because of the turmoil that we've gone through with that funding source, we would also have issues with timing with those expenses. So I expect as we get through June, we'll have that will catch up, and we'll see where we end with that as well. And then capital is the other larger expense that is under. And if you remember, we increased the transfer line in the 5-year forecast. So we're taking those funds, transferring them to permanent improvement for the items that would normally have been in that line. So bus purchases, and then other items around the school district for capital repair and maintenance. And then so that's the expenses. I still expect that we will be under expenses and the fiscal year under expenses. However, I will tell you that we're already in going through all of this planning for next year. I expect that some of those expenses will be higher next year. For instance, if we're only able to put 1 student per seat on a bus, that limits the number of students we can transport to school to 26 on a bus, which normally they have between 50 and 70 students on the bus. So that could mean that we have to do a lot of different routing, and my drivers would go from a possible 5-hour a day wage to 8 hours a day. So looking at those kinds of things, where we may be under expenses now, we could be higher than what we expect next year. So just keep that in mind as we move forward with all this fund planning. We also, the second item is talking about transfer of funds. Because of all of the COVID issues and the shutdowns, we don't anticipate being able to move forward with any of the potential agreements with advertising rights for the stadium. And so instead of the $20,000 that our board policy says that we are supposed to transfer into the turf account, I am suggesting that we transfer $100,000 just to make sure we have enough for the next replacement, which is in about 2 years, and then start to build that for then the following, and hope that between now and then we could maybe do some advertising rates to build those funds up. And then the last item that I have on the agenda are fiscal 21 permanent appropriations. All funds are just over $101 million, with the general fund being $71 million. I expect that next year, even though we do expect to see some increases in expenses, I don't think that they will be that high, because if you remember when we approved the 5-year forecast, we did not have the outcome of our union negotiations, which also not only impacted the base increase that we had in at 1%, which will now drop to 0, but it also had 100% of the performance payment that we actually are going to pay 83.33% of. So that will be reduced as well. Any questions?
With no questions, I will take a roll call, please.
Mr. Newmoth,
Yes.
Mr. Bush,
Yes.
Vice President Darrow,
Yes.
President McClelland.
Yes. Now to superintendent's items. I'll request a motion for items 9A through C.
So moved.
Mr. Bush, in a second.
Second.
Mr. Darrow. Mr. Sawyers.
Thank you, President McCollum, members of the Board of Education. Letter A this evening are the personnel action items in relationship to planning for 2020-21. The most dominant one is number 1. This is the reclassification of the non-teaching staff that have been removed from the collective bargaining agreement with OPSI Local 303. Now that we have an agreement that has been board adopted, we take the next step to reclassify the positions that were eliminated from the bargaining unit to basically recognize them as 1,400 exempt non-teaching staff within our school district. So that is the bulk of the personnel action agenda item, in addition to summer stipends specifically for professional development and or curriculum work. Letter B this evening for general business, there's 2 action items. The first is to approve the 2020-21 calendar based upon the outcome of the public hearing held this evening, as well as the annual requirement of Ohio Revised Code to issue notification to the Ohio Department of Education that we do not provide career technical education coursework specifically for students enrolled in grades 6, 7, and 8 within our school district. Then lastly, letter C this evening includes generosity and philanthropy from our community. We're very grateful for all the support we receive as a school district. We receive donations typically a month or so in arrears based upon when they come to the school district. So there is a very large donation based upon our partnership with the City of New Albany that appears on tonight's agenda for $250,000 towards the playground refurbishment, specifically for the installation of the community spaces for the pavilions that are being installed at the intermediate, primary, and middle school playground. So we're very grateful for the partnership with City Council and the City of New Albany in sponsoring the community outdoor space that'll be shared by the school district as well as our community with the refurbishment of our playground. As always, we have an incredible partnership with the New Albany Community Foundation. You will see that they appear in multiple line items this evening for the generosity within our community that sponsors specific activities to benefit our kids. And then lastly, also relationship to the playground, we also have the additional donation from our PTOs. So our primary, intermediate, and middle school, and they'll come at different stages based upon when they're in the accounts receivable department for finance, also did their fundraising for the Ninja Challenge as an example from the primary and intermediate school. And you can see tonight's donation is also part of that comes to the school district. We're very grateful for everything that they do to support our playgrounds across our school campus. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions? With none, we'll take a roll call, please.
Mr. Bush,
Yes.
Vice President Darrow,
Yes.
Mr. Newmoff,
Yes.
President McClelland.
Yes. And that brings us to adjournment. I'll request a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Newmoff in a second.
Second.
Mr. Darrow, roll call, please.
Newmoff,
Yes.
Vice President Darrow,
Yes.
Mr. Bush,
Yes.
Mr. McClelland.
Yes, we are adjourned. Thank you for watching. Our next meeting is Thursday, July 9th at 6 p.m. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Everyone.